Hi, it's Captain Mike here with you again. I'm going to try to do a real quick video. I always say that, but I am going to try to make this one quick. And I've done something similar to this, making plaster molds, only I made them of bowls and things. But this was just something I was fixing to do anyway, and I thought, hey, I'll video this because I think it's going to be kind of cool. We're going to make a plaster mold of this steer head, okay? And this is something that was given to me by a friend the other day. We stopped by their shop and they had these. They had about 4 of them in a pack. Very flimsy, but I think it's going to work for what I want to do. I'm going to show you exactly how easy it is to make a plaster mold of anything like this. That's you know, that you can lay flat and doesn't have any undercuts on it. This is how simple it's going to be. All of the wood that I have here is scrap. I mean, I just went outside a while ago, rambled around in the rain, tried to find what I could that would work. I always try to find wood that's big enough so that whenever I get it together, I've got at least 2 inches on all of the important parts. And that's so the plaster will be thick enough to absorb the water, and it'll form a shell from with your slip casting when you do slip casting, and it'll form it real quick. So what we're going to do is, well, first we're going to put this mold together, and it's not going to take very long at all. No glue. You can make the bottoms where it fits inside of this mold or this way. You just have to do the math. Okay, and no glue required, as I said. I've already pre-drilled all the holes. It doesn't take a lot. I drill, holes wherever I think that they need to be to match accordingly with the other pieces. And just for grins and giggles, I put one in the bottom just to kind of hold the bottom in. Bottom's not going anywhere really if you don't move this mold. And that's it. Pretty much you're going to need about 12 sheetrock screws, which you may need more, you may need less, just depends on how many screws that you want to put in it. Now I drilled all these holes with an 1/8 inch drill bit. It's not a big deal. I drilled them so that they're approximately the size of the sheetrock screw, the shank diameter. It just makes them so that they will not split the wood. If you don't drill the holes, they will sometimes split the wood unless you're using plywood. And that's it. And you don't have to have an electric drill, but it sure is great. You drill your holes, change the bit out, and that's all you have to do. Now when you first start here, you want to make sure that one corner is perfectly square. It doesn't matter about anything else at this particular point in time. Put your screw in there and just kind of run it down. And you want to get it as exact as you can. But it really doesn't matter if it's bowed in a little or bowed out a little. It doesn't matter because when you demold, you're going to take this thing apart. So let me go ahead off camera and put all these screws in, and I'll be right back. Okay, we've got our little box together, and the seams look very good in here on this one. But I'm going to give you a tip. Be ready with some modeling clay. You should have some modeling clay. If you don't, go to Walmart and buy you some. You can use this stuff in mold making and in so many ways. But anyway, just in case you don't get your seams real tight, don't worry about it. Get you some modeling clay. Make yourself, your little snakes or your little worms. Remember doing that when you was a young'un, and that's the first thing you'd make out of modeling clay is a big old worm or a snake. And then you just put it there all the way around if you want to and smoosh it down. And that will seal the edge there. Do not be tempted to use the silicone to seal it up with, because you want to take this thing apart. And you use glue or silicone, it's going to be difficult to get apart. So use the clay. It'll solve the problems of having a gap. If you have a gap, you're going to know it, because when you pour the plaster in there, it's going to seek the lowest point, and it's going to get out all over your table and splash on your floor and on your shoes and all that stuff. We don't want to do that. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to place the master that we're going to use in here, just like that, and we'll find the best place for it. Now, if you have a tag like this and you want to cut the tag off, you can. I actually am going to leave my tag on because it's going to give a little surface. The only problem I can find with this thing here is it is so flimsy. that it's going to be hard to run a bead of silicone around all these edges. I'll show you where I'm going to start, and then I'll finish it off on offline or off camera, and then I'll show you what I think I'm going to have to do to make this thing work. But what I do is I take my silicone, and again, I told you in an earlier video, this is one of the greatest things that you can have in your shop. Just get you I use clear, you can use white, it doesn't matter. You know, it depends on what you're going to do. Clear works in a lot more applications than anything else. But all you do is you'll take it, and if you've got a nice, like a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch plastic ridge, then it works really good, really good. But if you don't, you're going to have to kind of fake it. And so, you know, don't be afraid to use this stuff because you're going to clean it up. And I just go and apply it liberally right down the seam as best I can. And just like that, okay? And we're going to go off camera now and finish this up. It might take a couple of minutes. So I'll be right back with you. Okay, we've got a real messy bead of silicone all the way around this. And just a word of caution, if you will say, if you're using real silicone, which you're supposed to 100%, it's going to smell a little bit like vinegar. So it could be a strong odor. If that offends you, you might want to have a little circulation of the air or however you want to do it. But what you do next is you'll take your master and place it right dead slap dab in the middle as best you can, and it will stay there. And then what you're going to do is try to go around it, and I'll have to get a Q-tip for this, and you don't want to get any silicone on this up on the edges like I did. You can't see it, but there's some here. But you would take your Q-tip and you'll work it down, and you want to make sure you've got every crevice right here filled with something, because if you don't, the plaster will run up under it. Now, that's not a game stopper. If plaster runs up under it a little bit, it's just going to be something you've got to dig out of the final product. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and, again, go off camera and do my final cleaning around here. And I'll come back and show you what we're probably going to have to do to hold this thing flat, and then we'll pour the plaster. Okay? Be right back. Okay, what I did was, you can see that I took masking tape and I placed it in strategic points on this thing to hold it flat against the bottom. And then I took my Q-tip and I went around it as best I could, actually as I put the tape on, and I cleaned it up, paying real close attention to use my fingers and anything on the skull part or the horn part. I tried to clean it off. And you will, you know, you probably have better eyes than I do, so, you know, you'll just keep going around it here and cleaning it off as best you can. And if you want to get it perfect, and spend all the time that you need to get it off and make it perfect. Me, I just kind of see if this stuff will work, and nothing that I do is ever perfect. Now, what I'm going to do is leave this just like this for, oh, maybe, I don't know, I'll leave here probably an hour, and let the silicone begin to set up so that I can take the tape loose. And in the case of this thing, it's so flimsy when you take the tape off. Be real careful, because it's going to want to pull it loose. It takes really about 24 hours for the silicone to set up. But I may rush it because I'd like to get this poured today, and possibly even demolded today, because once you pour the plaster, it doesn't take but less than an hour, then you can demold. A lot of times in 30 minutes you can demold. Does not mean the plaster is ready to use, but it's solidified enough to take the mold apart. This is going to come out very easy because it's so flexible. So we'll leave it with you guys for a while until I'm comfortable with that being adhered to the bottom, and we're going to come back and we will take the tape off. We'll clean up a little bit around it a little bit more, and if we find any places we missed, we'll add a little bit. And then we're going to get ready to pour plaster, and I think this is going to really be a neat mold. So there you go. I'll be back with you guys just as soon as this thing sets up. Okay, I think this thing has dried sufficiently that I can take the tape off. We will find out. All it can do is come loose. And then we'll go to the next step. Now, as I said, you know, I'm not going to really pay a whole lot of attention to it, because I'm not worried about too much plaster getting under there. But you know, if you really want to be conscientious, now is the time to double check your seam, make sure everything looks really good to you, and then you're ready to kind of grease this puppy up. I don't know whether I've got enough of this left or not, but we're going to try. I use vegetable oil. You can also use Vaseline and several other things. It's more important, I think, that I get the oil vegetable spray on this, because the sides will come off, the bottom, and this is what I really need. So all I do is just kind of spray it around like this, and just get it kind of in there really good on the sides, just like that. And then I take the brush and I kind of smooth it all out, because this vegetable oil does have a tendency to pool up on the plastic. Now, it'll just soak right into the wood, so it's not a really big deal on it. And but you want to just kind of spread it out in case your spray pattern is not too good. We'll go ahead and put I don't know how much is left in this thing, probably not a lot. It don't look like it's spraying. It looks like I'm already out. Okay, we're going to go with what we got. Hopefully it won't stick forever and ever and all that stuff. Maybe this will work. And I'll go get me another can of that. So once you get that done, you actually are ready to pour the plaster in here. So we're going to mix us some plaster. And I know the next question you're going to ask is, well, how much plaster do I need for this? I don't know. I guesstimate. There are formulas. You could take actually the dimensions of this and do a cube formula with, you know, high school math, and come up with it really close. The only thing that would be missing if you did the math on how much the volume of this is the object in the bottom. You know, it'll displace a little bit of plaster, but that would be a little bit, and you know, you're gonna have something else you're gonna put the plaster in if you have excess plaster. Me, I'll wing it. Yeah, I appropriated this old bucket from outside, and I'm just going to fill it about I say a third full of water. Don't plaster in it until the plaster heaps up above the water. It doesn't settle into it, and I'll watch the plaster absorb into that little heap of plaster. Stir it up good, pour it in here. If there's not enough, I mix some more plaster up and pour it on top. So far that has worked out fine for me. So I'm going to go ahead and mix this plaster up, and we'll be right back. Okay, I've got the plaster mixed up in this bucket. Like I said, it may be too much, it may not be enough, I don't know. I've already let the plaster sit for a while, just a very short time. Let it hydrate as much as possible, because in a batch this big, I'm not used to pouring this much at one time, and sometimes it goes in too fast and it'll cause lumps. Now, as long as those lumps are completely hydrated, and by that I mean they have absorbed all the water, it's really not going to make any difference on this kind of a mold. I beat it up as good as I could. If you want to use a blender, that's great. I let the bubbles rise to the top, and I used a little alcohol. I keep alcohol in this sprayer to spray on my glass, clean my glass up before I put it in the kiln. And if you have bubbles on the top, you can spray the alcohol on those bubbles, and the bubbles will immediately bust. So I do that in the container, whatever container I'm using. Then I pour the plaster, bump it around a little bit, try to agitate it, and then before I quit, I spray some on the bubbles on the top. Just makes it look better. So here we go, folks. We're going to pour this in here, and we're going to see how short, how much short we are on plaster. I generally start pouring very slowly and let the plaster creep up on the master as best I can. It seems to cause less bubbles, and maybe we won't have a disaster, or maybe we will. Sometimes these disasters make for really good videos. Folks like to see the fails. But here we go. It's all covered up, and it's not going to fill this mold up completely, but I'm going to call it done. because it's close enough. It's within a ½ inch, let's say, and it's going to be great. If this works out really good and I need a mold, I'm at a mess here. If I need a mold that's thicker, then I'll pour another one. But we're just going to see how this works. You could get a hammer and you could bump on this, whatever you want to do. You should have no bubbles on your piece on there if you poured it slowly. Now I know you won't be able to see this, but if you could see the bubbles that are rising, I just spray a little alcohol. The bubbles go away. It's just for aesthetics, you know. I don't like to see the bubbles. You just gotta bump it, let the bubbles rise. If you have a little hammer or something, you might want to tap it. And I'll probably do that a little bit as it sets. Okay. Speaking of setting, that's what we're going to do. We're going to leave this and let it set. Then I'll come back and remove the mold and or the sides to the mold, and we'll see if we've got something that's usable. It's going to be interesting. So kind of bear in there with me. This takes a while, but we're going to get it done. Okay. We're fixing to unmold this thing. It's been a long day. I hope it's going to be a short video. A couple of things you can see right here where I did have some seepage. Remember we talked about seepage and making the little snakes out of clay. I didn't do that, and if you don't have a really big hole, you won't have a really big issue with that. But this plaster is still warm, and it does heat up when it begins to cure. And most of the gurus say it's okay if you unmold it while it's still warm. Fact is, some say that it works better. I don't know. We'll find out. Now, you saw how much plaster that I poured in here, but if I had mixed this whole bucket up down here, I'd have had plaster left over. So that brings me to this point, and I've mentioned this before when we dealt with plaster and excess plaster. Always have you something handy to pour the excess plaster in. One of the best things that you can do, especially if you're working with clay, is have you some containers that you can make plaster bats in. And a bat is just a flat piece of plaster that will absorb water out of the clay. This is the bottom out of a 5-gallon bucket. It works great for making a round bat. Dollar Tree purchase, it makes a great flat bat. But when you do pour it, you want to make sure that all 4 corners are secured, because it's a flexy little cheap thing. But it makes a really nice bat, you know, about not quite 3/4 of an inch thick. But those bats come in very, very, very handy. So that is my tip, you might say, for this. So we're going to unmold this thing, and it won't take but just a second, I hope, if I have the drill turned on the proper way. We're just going to turn all these out. Okay, this is the last screw. And we're through. And if all goes well, the wood's going to come right off. And it did. And as you saw, I didn't have a tremendous amount of vegetable oil to spray on it. But as a rule, the wood comes loose. And it does seem like it's coming loose a little better since it's warm. Now, at this particular point, it's got some ridges up here. If you want to, now's a good time to scrape them, and you just need a straight edge, you know, something like this. Just take the things off of it and you can scrape them, you know, and get all that mess off if you wanted to do it now. We're not going to do it right now, okay? It's still kind of mucky and wet when you do that, right? But that's a good stage to do it because it comes off very easy. All right, moment of truth, folks. Moment of truth. We're going to pick this up, and see, I got a mess under here, and that's how much it went under it, and that's okay. That's okay. And if all goes well, this piece will come right on off too. May have to convince it that it needs to. And voila, that's full of plaster. That did not work real well. So we're going to have to put it back together. Because I expected a little seepage here, but I didn't expect it to be completely full of plaster. Well, let's see. Let's try something. Maybe we could luck out here. Take my trusty pocket knife. if we can get the plastic to come out with the plaster, we'll be good to go. Let's just start right here with this little level that, what do you gonna call it? And dig down. I don't want to dig into the plaster too much. That didn't work. There you go, there you go. It's coming up. Don't know what I'm gonna get, but you know, at this particular point, it's gonna come out, okay? So now's just the time to say, you know, make sure you've got a good seal here. Maybe I rushed it. Maybe I didn't wait for it to dry real good. Maybe this bottom was too rough, but nevertheless, it's gonna work. Boom, that's it. You can even use this over again if you don't tear it up too bad. I sprinkled it up a little, but I could have been more careful. All right, folks, that's what you have. When it dries, and it'll take a while for this chunk of plaster to dry, you have got a negative of this head, and you can pour slip in here. It'll make a shell, you know how slip casting is, and then when it pops out, you fire it, and you've got a nice wall hanging. And that's it. It worked. And it worked pretty good considering that I rushed the heck out of it. But it works. And I can't wait for it to dry out so we can, you know, see how it's going to cast. All right, folks. Captain Mike. And this is my video on making a simple mold. No bull. That's a pun. And appreciate y'all watching my video. Thank you.